one regret you have from Operation Sindoor?
आतंकवाद ऐसा रोग है पाकिस्तान कि जो रूह में घुस चुका है। जब तक ये रोग इनको अंदर से ख़त्म नहीं कर देगा, ये हमेशा कोशिश करें कि ये जहर जो है बॉर्डर के पास हमारी तरफ भेजें। और पिछली 2 बार जब इन्होंने ये किया, दूसरी बार पुलवामा के समय मैं पश्चिमी बेड़ा के कमांड में था। मैंने अपने सब कमांडर्स को उस वक्त बताया था कि अगली बार नौसेना का वार। और इस बार जब इन्होंने ये हरकत करी, मैंने मेरे अपने सब कमांडर्स को बताया, इस बार नौसेना तैयार। और इस बार वो वार हाथ से निकल गया, दुश्मन चुक गया, पहले से ही पीछे हट गया और उसने हाथ खड़े कर दिए। अगली बार
I have goosebumps right now when you said ugly bad.
They tried their best shots. After they tried the best shots, all that happened is that their hands were broken, and we had a free position in which we could have gone and struck them at every level.
We have targeted the length and breadth of the adversary.
But it was not part of our larger national objectives to do that. That is the whole issue about escalation control. I think this is a very led, tightly planned and very tightly executed operation. The deterrence was if they tried to lift the finger would have been broken.
Oh my God.
That was the deterrence and the new boundary.
देश के दुश्मनों ने भी देख लिया, जब सिंदूर बारूद बन जाता है तो नतीजा क्या होता है।
And that's why they didn't try and lift a finger.
One year after Operation Sindoor, we speak to the man who commanded India's most critical maritime theatre during one of its most consequential military operations. Vice Admiral Sanjay Jasjit Singh joins us to decode CPA deterrence, anti-piracy warfare, and the Navy's expanding strategic role. But more importantly, sir, 1 year of Operation Sindoor, and we are very chuffed to have you with us in our studio.
Thank you, Ms. Aditi. It's my pleasure to be here with you and your viewers today.
Thank you so much, sir. Sir, 1 year on, most Indians want to know one thing. What brought Pakistan to its knees? What is it that forced Pakistan to pick up the phone and call the Indian DGMO and say, okay, we want a ceasefire?
The realization of what would have happened if they had not done so.
What would have happened if they had not done so?
It's still paused. You want me to give that full answer?
We'd like to hear what really, because okay,
right.
what we've heard so far is that there was some secret order which was given to the Navy, which is secret to most of us. What was that secret order? We don't know. If you can share it today with us, we'd love to hear it.
No, I think that's a little speculative, Ms. Aditi. The orders were common to all 3 forces. There's no exclusive, separate, secret order that is passed to the Navy alone. The orders are common to all 3 forces. The orders were straightforward. There is going to be action taken in retaliation to take out the terrorist camps and centers that have been the sponsors of terrorism, violating every possible international law, and the intransigence of the Pakistani side to take any action against something that is evidently state-sponsored and closely associated with the Pakistani armed forces. In that, each force had a specific role. The maritime theatre was poised for necessary coercion, building up to compellence should the requirement be there. The entire maritime forces were aligned for posing deterrence initially. We were ready for the escalation to the next level, whatever it took to bring the other side to their senses. As it happened, fortunately for them, they realized and they called it off and sued for peace at the first possible option, and that's why we've held on. And so a year down the line, the national leadership has clearly indicated the operation is on pause and remains on pause till such time as there is some demonstrable change in the outlook and posture from the other side. And should there be a requirement, all 3 forces remain stood to for whatever action needs to be taken. So there's no separate exclusive order that needs to be passed. The orders are very clear. Take out the terrorist camps, take out the terrorist entities, and in case there is any escalation, be ready to counter that escalation as required till such time as the other side sues for peace.
May 8th and 9th, that escalation happened, and India responded to that escalation. We saw that across the entire Western Front. We saw it happening. As far as the Navy is concerned, what is it that you were doing at that time to keep that deterrence alive?
It has been posited across to them very clearly where a line is drawn and where beyond which they should not, for their own sake, push that particular line. And that is exactly what was put across. The Navy's role, as I said earlier, was for deterrence and escalation control. So we were poised for action across the spectrum of conflict. But the deployment was for deterrence, and the deterrence worked. All the Pakistani forces pulled back, right close to their coast. The entire sea control, uncontested, stayed with the Indian Navy, and we remained poised till 10th evening when the ceasefire was, request for ceasefire of the Pakistani side was accepted by the Indian leadership, and thereafter we pulled back and then suitably de-escalated and pulled back to our normal operational positions.
When you say deterrence and that you had complete control over the seas, what does that exactly mean?
Right. It means we were prepared and ready for any action, especially any hostile action that any Pakistani forces may have tried on the maritime theatre. And they knew it from the other side as well. Any such actions would have been immediately responded to in a robust manner. But our instructions were to maintain a deterrent posture and be ready for responding should the other side try and escalate into the maritime side. Likewise, if the escalation was required from our side to be built up, we are fully poised and ready in a graduated and a rapid manner to go from base deterrent posture to coercion to compellence.
The Navy, as on date, keeps inordinate amount of firepower. There's inordinate amount, including the BrahMos, is there on our ships today. Given that, what is the worst case scenario one could imagine if the enemy crosses the line?
It depends upon where the line is crossed and how much the line is crossed. Suffice to say that right from stopping any surface, underwater, or aviation hostile asset out at sea, stopping it, countering it, neutralizing it, to being able to take out the entire maritime forces of the other side, we were prepared, ready, and stood to.
Looking back now, 1 year later, as a military operation, what is your assessment?
You asked me to give it a set of marks on scale?
No, I would ask you to talk about its strengths and weakness of the Operation Sindoor campaign.
Any campaign has to be measured by the objectives and aims. The objective and aim was very clear that we are not going to allow this kind of dastardly, perfidious acts by Pakistani forces and sponsored forces to go unanswered. That is the bottom line. That required retaliation against those terrorist centers to send a strong message across. Is the first level of message. The second level of message was, in the event that the Pakistani armed forces, because they're joined at the hip with those terrorist entities, feel the pain on something they have not been willing to take action themselves and are joined to it and want to jump into the fray, then whatever action they are trying to take will be adequately countered. And they did that. They tried their best shots. After they tried the best shots, all that happened is that their hands were broken. And we had a free position in which we could have gone in and struck them at every level. But it was not part of our larger national objectives to do that. That is the whole issue about escalation control. I think this is a very tightly led, tightly planned, and very tightly executed operation. Whichever you look at it. You look at all the other operations, the way they've gone out of control. There's a clear objective. We stuck to that objective. We had a plan of action. Within that plan of action and contingency planning, whatever the other side tried, it was countered, and in a calibrated manner, response was given. The maritime front on this occasion did not need to be invoked beyond the strategic leverage and pressure that was done. Remember, there was no movement of any vessels off the Pakistani coast for those 72 hours. Nothing at all. No aircraft flying, no ships sailing. All the Navy was bottled up close to their coast. Had they tried to do anything different, they know and we know what the outcome would have been.
What kind of options do you have in the Navy as far as, so the deterrence was, of course, they couldn't lift a finger near any of their coastlines or come near the waters. But
No, miss, the deterrence was not that they could not lift. The deterrence was if they tried to lift the finger would have been broken. That was the deterrence, and they knew about it. And that's why they didn't try and lift a finger.
and what are the options that the Navy has within its ambit to take the next step?
The Navy's got a host of options. As I said, primarily the posture was strategic. You're sending a strategic message across. At the tactical level, depending on which kind of an ingress is sought to be made by the other side, whether it's at a surface level, above surface, missiles, torpedoes, special forces, aircraft, there is adequate multi-domain force power that's available with the Indian Navy that would have been able to counter it, raise it to the next level, and provide return fire and retaliatory fire, which would have made the aggressor wish that he had not taken that first step in the first place.
Talked about theatre commands for a long time, but the jointness that was displayed during Operation Sindoor, your views on that and whether this is the way forward now?
Firstly, jointness is different from integration, and this is not the first time. There's not a single operation that's been carried out all the way back from 1947-48 Junagadh operations. When the Indian Armed Forces have fought, they have not fought shoulder to shoulder. The jointness has been there in every conflict. The issue that comes off what we are talking about, or the next step of jointness, is in the joint planning, the joint procurements, the joint procedures, the joint communications, the joint contingency detailed planning so that you're able to respond quickly and fast. That is what we saw in clear evidence during Op Sindoor. So these services, all three forces, have been working together for several years in aligning all these aspects that I spoke about, from planning, communications, targeting, contingencies. And when the time came, they were able to respond in the timeline that the national leadership had put in place. They had wanted it faster, we would have responded faster. If we had to stretch it out to send a stronger message to the other side, if they didn't understand the message the way it was put across, then whatever language they needed to understand in, we were ready for all those languages.
Do you feel that turnaround time of putting together an operation as big as this, and when I say big, I mean the non-escalation part of it, going at it, but with complete control, planning something like this 1 year down the line, how do you look at it? Do you see that this ability was always there in the forces, or is it something that's come about over the last several years?
It is something they've been working at. The format, as you've seen, at the time of our Parakram was entirely different. At that particular time, we were looking at mobilizing. There was a great period of time which belonged to a different era. The timelines for putting your resources together, your forces together, focusing on the specific plan, that took much more time. The doctrines of the armed forces evolved in the last 2 decades, where we realized that the timelines are going to be shorter. So we've been doing our contingency planning for shorter timelines for a range of options. And this scenario is something we've already been through. This is the third occasion when you had strong terrorist strikes from across the border and a message had to be sent across. So it's something that was known, prepared for, planned, discussed. And when the time came, the timeline that was given, all three forces were ready in accordance with that timeline.
Any lessons learned and changes implemented in the last 1 year after Operation Sindoor?
I've retired in July last year, but needless to say, any conflict of any kind, especially one where we have been involved ourselves,
Right.
leads immediately to intense introspection, reflection, and analysis of where we could have done better, where there were certain areas that need work, where the enemy has shown themselves to be weak, where the enemy may also work to overcome those weaknesses the next time around. And those are factored back into the contingency planning cycle. And it's a continuous issue where you remain ready. And I have absolutely no doubt with what I've seen in the time that I've been in service, the armed forces have been ready, the armed forces are ready, and the armed forces will remain ready.
One regret you have from Operation Sindoor?
Can I say it in Hindi?
Yes.
आतंकवाद ऐसा रोग है पाकिस्तान में जो उनके जो रूह में घुस चुका है। जब तक ये रोग उनको अंदर से ख़त्म नहीं कर देगा, ये हमेशा प्रयत्न करते रहेंगे। ये हमेशा कोशिश करेंगे ये जहर जो है बॉर्डर के पास हमारी तरफ भेजा। और पिछली 2 बार जब इन्होंने ये किया, दूसरी बार पुलवामा के समय मैं पश्चिमी बेड़ा के कमांड में था, तो मैंने अपने सब कमांडर्स को उस वक्त बताया था कि अगली बार नौसेना का वार। और इस बार जब इन्होंने ये हरकत करी तो मैंने मेरे अपने सब कमांडर्स को बताया, इस बार नौसेना तैयार। पर इस बार वो वार हाथ से निकल गया, दुश्मन चुक गया, पहले से ही पीछे हट गया और उसने हाथ खड़े कर दिए। अगली बार
Oh my God. I have goosebumps right now when you said ugly bad. You were awarded the Sarvottam Yudh Seva Medal. What does, for your role in the Operation Sindoor, what does it mean for you personally?
it is a recognition of the work that the Indian Navy and all my men have put in. Ms. Aditi, I am only receiving it on behalf of every man and woman in uniform in the Western Naval Command and across the Navy who was deployed in those operations. They were stood to, they were ready, they were preparing for this eventuality for the defense of the country. And I happen to be the one who's in command. And the award is a recognition of the entire Indian Navy's efforts and those men and women's efforts, and I'm only receiving it on their behalf.
If Operation Sindoor had extended for 10 more days, what do you anticipate would have happened?
We are ready for, as I said, full spectrum of operations and conflict. The plan was very clear: target the terrorist entities, and any interference or endeavors to try and escalate from the other side would be suitably countered. So I have absolutely no doubt. In the first 2 rounds itself, the Air Force and the Army adequately proved, and what we did out at sea in countering them and pushing them back into the holes, they never came out of them, put the pressure back onto them. Had they tried to continue or escalate, we would have countered every level of escalation, added a few more % on it, and given it back. As I said, they took their best shots. At the end of the best shots, it made no difference to us. Our armed forces, our country remained standing. Their hands had aches and pains, and they didn't have very much they could have done beyond that. And whatever they had tried, those escalatory steps had been thought through, planned, and we were ready for them. So whether it was 1 day more, 10 days more, or beyond that, Ms. Aditi, the other side knows and we know we would have been able to counter it, and we even today are ready to counter it. Let them try it.
As you just said, ugly bar, no sena ka var. You think if it had extended for 10 days more, it would have been the Navy's turn?
Less than 10 days. If it had extended a few hours more, let me leave it at that.
Especially the 2 fronts that we now face. China on one end, Pakistan on one end. Last I reading something that China is now giving them their new submarines.
So one has just been commissioned.
One has just been commissioned. This 2-front threat that we have at sea, if we are at sea, then from the sea, how prepared are we to combat this 2-front threat? The Army and the Air Force are, of course, there. But I'm particularly talking about the maritime effort.
At the maritime front, remember, anything when we speak of 2 fronts, on the land, you have a seamless border. Out at sea, the waters are also seamless. But the distance from China for them to deploy their forces in this region and the amount of forces they can currently deploy shapes their strategic outlook. So in any conflict that you have a primary threat. In the scenario that we were in, where we had a threat from Pakistan, Chinese support necessarily was not likely to be in the kinetic manner. Those issues, conditions under which 2 countries may get involved, we have planned, we have war-gamed, and we are prepared for those. Suffice to say, at the diplomatic and the national level, Pakistan was pretty much isolated because of its single-minded pursuit of using terrorism as state policy. I don't see in the foreseeable future any such actions where Pakistan relies back on its favorite weapon and favorite group of people, the standard terrorists, that any country would be standing by their side in a kinetic manner.
Talk to us about Pakistan's vulnerability at sea.
Pakistan remains vulnerable. Pakistan's entire outlook has been focused on sea denial. That means deny the space for the Indian Navy to move in and act against their interests. What they forget is they are also very vulnerable outlets. If we are an island nation, let's be very clear, we are an island nation with land borders.
Yeah.
That's our dependence. Pakistan is also an island nation, which has got much smaller borders, which just has one major port, and that's their lifeline. If that lifeline is squeezed, it affects the entire country. And that is why it is of great strategic pressure to them. So for them, the biggest thing is they're constantly looking in ways and means in which they can keep the Indian Navy at bay by exercising sea denial. Our counter to that is to have the ability to exercise sea control, primarily to first make sure that our sea lines of communication remain secure and robust, and second, be able to interdict his slocks and be able to interdict his naval forces should the need arise.
You said that China, of course, not coming in actively.
Kinetic.
Yeah, in kinetic action. However, it supports Pakistan through
Diplomatically, military support,
equipment, and equipment.
And
the
always,
submarine that
and,
just
and information
got
is always possible.
Absolutely. Maybe help from satellites, who knows? But that's where I'm coming from. With the help of China, which arguably has a very solid naval force, comparable to the Indian naval force,
Much more. China has the largest naval force in the world,
Yes.
larger than the United States Navy.
Yes, but it is the Indian Ocean. It's called the Indian Ocean region for a reason, right? We are dominant there. But having said that, the problem is not just Pakistan. Pakistan remains an irritant. But when combined with support, on this kind of support from China, how much of a challenge is that?
Okay. Firstly, Pakistan is more than an irritant. Pakistan is beyond being a nuisance. Pakistan is a problem to itself and a problem to everybody else. 2 decades ago, Madeleine Albright called Pakistan the international migraine. It's gone beyond an international migraine. Its actions, especially those by using terrorism as state policy, have reached the level of being a tumor. And that is a tumor that Pakistan needs to take care of and sort out internal to it. As I said, till either they're going to get consumed by it, or till such time as there is no distinction between the state and the tumor. And that's pretty much times they've come pretty close to that. But leave that aside. China does have major interest in the Indian Ocean, and that is why since 2008, we've seen a growing Chinese presence in the Indian Ocean. And that's to be expected. With their economy growing, with the Navy growing, they are producing 10 to 12 ships of the level of the most advanced frigates and destroyers per year. Today, they have a Navy that is larger than the United States Navy. But in combat power, projection potential, it still is not as strong. They'll get there in a few years. The 3rd aircraft carrier is getting ready. So expect them to have increasing amount of presence in the Indian Ocean. As far as we are concerned, it primarily is focused on what are our interests. Our interests in keeping the sea lane safe in peacetime and against subconventional threats. You constantly got threats of piracy, you got threats of narcotics operations, you got threats of drone attacks. Please remember that 95% of our trade, Indian trade, is carried on foreign flag vessels.
No.
So their security and safety is of importance to us. 1/6 of the world's seafarers are Indian citizens. But in the Indian Ocean region, 1/3 of the entire merchant vessels' crews are Indian. So we've got huge stakes in which we're reaching out and trying to provide reassurance to the ships, to the lanes. And China's actions thus far have largely been in support of their interests. There have been no strongly conflicting issues between us. There have been a couple of occasions when their ships have strayed and sort of violated the international laws on research within EEZ, but that is quickly managed both by us as well as by the Chinese side by pulling them out. So at the current moment, I don't see a military concern or a military threat at this stage. Their posturing and positioning is largely for a strategic purpose. We are aware of it. The Indian Navy is monitoring it. And the Indian Navy is suitably engaged with other levels of government, as well as interacting. There are times for anti-piracy, we have cooperated with the Chinese. There have been times when the Chinese fishing vessels have required search and rescue. We have provided the search and rescue.
Really?
Yeah, 2 years ago, or 2.5 years ago. I think go back to 2023, maybe about middle of 23. The Chinese fishing vessel overturned. Their people were in the water. The president of China announced how the Chinese task force was being reverse course and told to go for saving them. The Indian Navy reached before that. Yeah, because we are present in the region, maintaining surveillance, maintaining domain awareness. We provide a life raft. Our aircraft went across and contacted the Chinese task force, which is heading in a slightly different direction, pointed them precisely where to go, follow up and be able to rescue the people from the life raft that we had provided. So we worked in cooperation with them. And the Chinese ambassador at that time even expressed publicly his thanks for it. When we've been doing anti-piracy operations in the earlier days, when it was at its peak in the Gulf of Aden, we coordinated. So out at sea, you need to have a degree of coordination, if not cooperation, across all navies. And we've been working with everybody, including the Chinese Navy. Yes, at a strategic level, there are aspects and issues of concern. That what are the longer term trend? What would this mean supposing the relations go south? But currently, I think both at the national level as well as the military level, we're both aware of each other's strengths, possibilities, options, contingencies, and the job of the armed force is to prepare for all those contingencies. And as I said, Ms. Aditi, we are prepared.
You said we help, we cooperate, etc. But there are also stories about the China's string of pearls strategy surrounding us. It's bullying smaller rivals in the Indian Ocean region. Can we possibly see some sort of that kind of a Chinese bullying in the Indian Ocean region, or does India's maritime prowess doesn't allow China that leverage in the waters as it did on land?
Speculative.
Yes.
Very speculative. The string of pearls theory is centered around an analyst working on what is happening in the South China Sea. There's no immediate parallel in the Indian Ocean. They don't have the bases that are required to set up that string of pearls. Here you got scattered outposts where they've got interests. As I said, as a nation, they've been investing in the BRI, they've been investing in relations, they've got huge economic investments. We ourselves have a very robust bilateral trade with China. So that is one part of it. Right. Second, what all options could occur? What are the scenarios in which we may not be on the same page? What are the across the spectrum from minor irritants moving up the chain to where we are no longer in a position of cooperation, but we are in a position where we would be having competition to possible or potential conflict. This is an ongoing issue, Ms. Aditi, which all military forces across the world are engaged in all the time and looking at it. It would be speculative to say if they do this specific issue, how would we respond? Simply
so you're
put,
saying
the
that's
answer is it depends.
speculative in the sense that what I meant is that is there a possibility of that ever happening as we see things right now?
At the current moment, our relations with China at the national level are stable. Yeah. It's now 6 years since Galwan. Issues are stabilized and settled. There have been constant pockets of up and down which have occurred in our relations. At the national level, it's been balanced. At places where it's landed up in the military, our posture has been clear. We are ready. We don't wish for it to go out of control. We don't wish for it to escalate. We would rather it doesn't happen. But if anything happens, we are ready for it. And our posture remains a deterrent posture because our concept is defense. Avoid war by maintaining military readiness for war. If you're ready, our chance it won't happen. But if deterrence fails, then we are prepared to prosecute conflict to the level that's required to safeguard our national interests and sovereignty.
The Navy and its needs for the future. What must India accelerate faster? Submarines, carrier battle groups, is it drones, or is it logistics agreements with partner nations?
Leave the logistics agreement out, the rest of it, all of them. Why I say leave logistics agreements out of it, the logistics support agreements are getting a bit of an incorrect interpretation.
Okay.
All of these LSAs, and to my recollection, I think we have 7 of them currently, are primarily meant for joint exercises, for HADR, humanitarian assistance and disaster relief scenarios, during port visits. They're not meant for operations per se. They're meant for these kind of actions. So that's not part of conflict management. Now, in the case of any conflict, looking at the vast maritime interests that we have. Remember, I said we are an island nation with land borders. And those are statements that the defense minister made a couple of years ago. They're not my coining, but absolutely spot on. Our dependence on the seas is so high that for our national prosperity and growth, we have to be able to counter all threats at sea, from piracy, from narcotics, from gunmen, from armed robbery, from drone attacks, to make sure that the sea lanes remain safe. Now, to do that, across this wide Indian Ocean where our interests are spread, you need a balanced blue water fleet which is capable of multi-domain operations. So it's not a question of this or that. It's a question of what are your interests and how do you safeguard your interests. For that, we need to build up the Navy. The Navy has grown a lot, but our interests have grown much faster than the naval strength has grown.
Yes. Can you just take our viewers through how exactly are we stacked in the Navy as of now? How are we stacked in the Indian Navy as far as submarines or nuclear submarines or aircraft carriers are concerned? And what is that enough?
But it's not enough. As I said, what is enough, you have to compare it with what the needs are.
Right.
The needs have been increasing tremendously, much faster than naval growth, but it's not to say the Navy is not growing. Now, let me take that bit by bit. Submarines. Nuclear submarines, we have capability at the nuclear deterrent level, which is nuclear propelled submarines with capability for carrying nuclear weapons. Now, that's at a different level altogether. It's manned and operated by the Navy, but it comes under a separate mechanism. Nuclear weapons are not for war fighting, they're for countering nuclear coercion. But the propulsion systems that you've created, the capability of designing and building your own submarine with nuclear propulsion is there with us today. Fully indigenous, we're able to do it, and there are programs in place for going down that route. Our submarine force is largely aging. But that is why we've gone in a decade ago for what we call the P-75, the Scorpion submarines. And we are now going in for under discussions for both P-75I and additional Scorpions. We're also looking at designing our own submarines in the future. We have the capability today. But anything to do with capabilities that are going to last you between 20 to 40 years, it takes time. And that's one thing we've got to remember out at sea. Everything takes time. It doesn't happen instantly. So we have to prepare and plan years, sometimes decades in advance. So the submarine building plan was put as a 30 years submarine building plan. We are behind on that plan, and that's why acceleration has been given in the last few years on these multiple projects that I mentioned. As far as carrier battle groups are concerned, it might surprise you to learn that the Navy's plans paper, it goes back to 1948, had seen ahead and forecast that the Indian Navy would need minimum of 4 aircraft carriers. 1948.
Wow. Okay.
Authored by a commander, Adhar Chatterjee, who rose to be the first admiral. Yeah, not just the chief, but also the admiral. At that time, I stand by that and say, even today, we need a minimum of 4 aircraft carriers. Currently, we have 2. We have an air wing, which we are splitting between the 2 currently, and that's the reason why we are going in for another squadron of Rafale M, which is the naval version, so that both the carrier battle groups are capable of deploying in full strength. Today, they can deploy with limitations because you have to split the forces, can deploy in full strength. Will this 2 be enough? This 2 is barely enough for the maritime interests that we have today. Barely, I say. One of them could be down for maintenance reasons. Looking at our national growth index, the way it is developing, I go back and said, what is put in 1948, I'll say an immediate figure we should be putting is at least 4 aircraft carriers. We have plans which we have pushed for a third one, which is under discussion, advanced stage of deliberation that's been going on. I would not be aware what the current status is. You'll have to ask the people who are serving. But we've been looking at what we've designed and built, our own aircraft carrier, with a 78% indigenous content. That is huge.
Huge. Yeah.
Huge. The steel on that aircraft carrier is Indian designed, Indian built, Indian specifications, the DMR 249A. Today, we are manufacturing steel of that quality ourselves. And that steel is there not just in the ship, it's there in the shipyard, it's there in the men and women of the Navy. And I'm confident that whenever the go-ahead is given, we'll go ahead and be able to build the aircraft carriers and ships required for maintaining our national interests and safeguard our security interests out at sea.
Move on to the Iran war.
Sure.
As a former Indian defense attaché to Iran,
Naval attaché.
naval attaché
We had
to Iran.
2. The other one was from the army.
Yeah. And as the former Western Fleet Command, how do you judge Iran's current naval might, where Trump every day says that all their ships are at the bottom of the sea, yet they seem to have effectively blocked the Strait of Hormuz through operations?
These are the aspects of how you mix geography with force. The fact that the Strait of Hormuz is just 21 nautical miles long, it gets covered by anything above small arms. The smallest of missiles and torpedoes, fast attack craft, boats, drones can cover that strait. And close up to land, even the United States Navy cannot operate in littoral waters when you have a potent opposition. Navies are not primarily meant for taking on shore-based forces directly.
Right.
And even the US Navy can't do that. So while they've imposed a distant blockade, staying few hundred
In the
kilometers
international
away,
waters, yeah.
well beyond international water. International waters technically is from 12 nautical miles out is international waters. But they're going way beyond even the exclusive economic zone because they cannot operate in those littoral waters. And Iran has factored and planned its defense strategy around asymmetric warfare. I told you about denial. Now, if you don't have the strength to be able to counter force on force, then you look for a strategy that can offset your disadvantages. So one of the two strands on which Iran has been concentrating, one is active defense. Try and see that the conflict, if and when it happens, which it has happened now, doesn't take place on their soil. And even now, other than airstrikes, there has been no other conflict as such on the land because they have been able to provide that effect of keeping the war away from the land. Second is asymmetric warfare. How do you use geography? How do you use denial? How do you use precision weapons to offset the advantage of mass, weight, and strategy on the other side? And that's what they've done. They've had from drones to missiles to torpedoes to fast attack craft to SF and used geography in a manner that they've been able to exercise complete sea denial on the Strait of Hormuz. And that is why today they're able to exercise that degree of control over it. Of course, to counter that, the United States Navy has and the US has announced a full blockade of Iranian ports. We are seeing it. I think probably another 3 to 4 weeks we'll come to know which one has been effective or both or neither.
That's a possible outcome with both backing down. But having said that, we spoke about Hormuz and we've seen how susceptible India is to a Hormuz blockade. Our pipeline dries up. The Strait of Malacca on the other side, that also is sort of now US wants to go there and do a defense agreement with Indonesia and do something. These choke points and India in the middle, how do we insulate ourselves from these choke points? Is there a possibility?
We're going to get into a long discussion on this, but let me try and give you a short summary. Choke points have always been there. Choke points have been there on land. All your passes are choke points. Any movement through a narrow pass or a valley between one area to the other provides militarily a possibility to exercise control against a far superior force. We've seen that at all warfares on land, can go back historically, can narrate half a dozen of incidents, including the Indo-Pak scenario, including in British India and Afghanistan time. Same thing is what happens out at sea. And that is why in the earlier days when the British Navy moved out, they tried to capture each of the choke points. Gibraltar, Aden for Bab el-Mandab, Hormuz for the Strait of Hormuz, Singapore for covering the Singapore Strait and the Phillip Channel. Each of this was to try and exercise control over the choke point so that you can have the leverage. Today, each of those are sovereign states. In some of the cases, the sovereignty is weakened because they've been parallel other military forces which have tried to exercise control. We've been seeing actions and militant actions, insurgent actions, unknown terrorist actions in the Suez Canal. We've seen it off Fujairah in the Gulf of Oman. We've been seeing the actions attributed and acknowledged by the Houthis in the Red Sea and the Gulf of Aden. So each of these places, the ability to interdict the shipping lanes has been exercised and shown. A group of pirates have done it in the Gulf of Aden and off Somalia. So that is the inherent vulnerability of merchant shipping. And that's why you need navies. And that's why you need navies to work in concert and coordination with each other to keep the sea lanes free. Insofar as a sovereign state exercising control over a state is concerned, largely it's because of diplomacy and international law. The UNCLOS does not permit closing of any strait whatsoever. Now, there are legal nuances that what happens if the state which is overlooking the strait is also under attack. Then it invokes the laws of belligerence and laws of warfare to try and counter any belligerent movement through that strait. But even then, you can't stop by law, if you adhere to the law, of all of the movement other than belligerents. Now, this is one of the first cases after a few hundred years that we are seeing such an action, and a few hundred years before the UNCLOS and the customary law came in, that you don't allow the coastal state to exercise control over a strait. We've seen past wars and actions taking place of forcibly trying to open a strait. Most of the cases, almost all, it's been disastrous consequences because the advantage is with the land power, who can exercise denial offshore much more than any naval power can in trying to open it. We've seen it in the Dardanelles, we've seen it in the Gallipoli campaign in the First World War. So right now, that's what we're
Canal
saying.
crisis.
The Suez Canal crisis.
Yeah.
So that is why you need alternate routes. So there is no immediate, straightforward answer. Your vulnerability to choke points is the reason why world over, all countries got together and said, let's observe international law. Everybody is dependent upon these choke points. Everybody is dependent upon the global commons for their prosperity and growth. And that is why the vision of Sagar, security and growth for all in the region. It is in collective consciousness and collective good that we work together to not allow the global commons of the waterways to be used or misused by any one party. So we are vulnerable, so is the rest of the world. Everybody is vulnerable to the movements of any inimical force. And that is why when piracy came about, it's a small pirates, half a dozen, 1 dozen. The effect of it 10 years ago was $18 billion a year on global economy. And that's why we had to deploy in such strength. And the Indian Navy is now being deployed continuously and consistently for 18 years and counting in the Gulf of Aden against piracy.
Yeah.
And whenever it's grown, we've deployed in greater strength to counter it.
You've been in the Gulf of Aden for some of these anti-piracy operations. When you say piracy, for a person like me who's never been to sea like you, all I can think of is Pirates of the Caribbean, and it's a movie show. And there's lots of action, lots of drama, lots of fun. But have you ever been up and close with a pirate in the sea during one of these operations? What is it like, one of these operations? Can you just take our viewers through that?
Personally, no, but my ship CEOs have been. I've been deployed, but we didn't come under any piracy attack, not the ships under our escort come under piracy attack when I was in command personally. But I was the CNC Western Naval Command when piracy came under resurgence from end 23 till about mid 2024. And this time around, we proactively deployed. The entire Western Fleet was deployed up front to prevent piracy from breaking out. Because once it breaks out, it's like a fire. To put it out after it's grown is very difficult. It takes immense amount of effort. The first time when it flared up in 2008 and 9, it grew till it reached Indian EEZ. And it took us almost a couple of years of very robust operations. The Indian Navy countered about 45 piracy attacks live at that time.
Wow.
And captured 120 pirates are those that we brought home at that time. But the rest we disarmed and sent back. But it took us 2 to 3 years till piracy could be pushed back and the Arabian Sea made safe and they pushed back into the Gulf of Aden. Now, when it surged a second time in December of 23, we again deployed. This time we deployed in full strength across the Arabian Sea, looking out for pirates, responding immediately. And we did, to my recollection, about 8 counter-piracy operations at that particular time. And we disarmed the pirates. In each of the occasions, we were able to rescue the hostages, including many of them were Iranian, some were Pakistani. You'll find it on Twitter. They were going around happily on their own without prompting, saying, Hindustan Zindabad for having saved their lives. It's all there in the public domain. We've had occasions where we have got 44 pirates have been brought home to India for justice for facing the law under the Piracy Act here. 35 of those is in the classic case of what happened with the MV Ruin. MV Ruin, incidentally, was the first vessel we came across which had been taken by the pirates. We managed to rescue 1 person. They had already got into Somali territorial waters. Thereafter, kept an eye in case that vessel comes out as a mother vessel. It did. It came out in March of 24 with 35 pirates on board, prepared to act as a mother lode for all shipping in the region. That is an operation. It's there in the public domain. The records of it have been put out. The Navy's had press conference. The data is all there. Suffice to say that in a short period of about 44 hours, we deployed 2 ships, 1 aircraft, deployed a full 2.5 Prahars of Marine Commandos in an Air Force aircraft which took off from Hindon, picked up the Marine Commandos from Bombay, flew 2,500 kilometers out at sea off the Somali waters, dropped them out at sea, And then we stormed the ship, which already had been disabled by the 2 ships that were there at that particular time, INS Kolkata and Subhadra. And the pirates were given an option of either surrender or sink. They chose to surrender.
There are a lot of lessons you learn at sea, and perhaps you want to share with us any personal anecdote, anything that you've seen at sea, which the people should know about, our viewers should know about, and how the Navy operates, the problems that it has to encounter at sea.
Essentially, yes, the challenge is there since the Navy operates over the horizon. People don't come to know what it's doing. So that is the reason why it's called the silent service.
Yeah.
Because you're not aware of what all is happening out at sea. Many times we are not even aware how dependent India is as a nation on the seas.
Yeah.
So that is changing. Challenges out at sea are unique. They are different from the challenge that you have on land. We all are familiar with the challenge on land because we see it in our daily civil lives. Out at sea, we are not aware because so many people haven't gone to sea. Now you'll have challenges from the weather. You'll have challenges, tyranny of time. Imagine you got people deployed, sailing time is 4.5 days away. And you get a message, there's a criticality at home. Is there any way that somebody will be able to get home at that time? Though we are now grown over a period of time, there happens to be a port call. We've had arrangements so we can try and get the crew back. That is one challenge. You're not in touch. Today, our people are used to, you pick up the phone and you're in touch with everybody back home.
Yeah.
So you need a very strong, robust ecosystem back home where the families are being looked after. You're reaching out to them. So the person out there is able to focus on his job and not be looking back over his shoulder. You have technical challenges. Any small part goes wrong. You can't sail back 5 days, 7 days, 8 days to try and get the spare part. So you need to firstly carry enough spares of your own, enough food and provisions of your own, ability to do the repairs on board your ship, link up, which we are doing today, link up through software with people back home. We've done through telemedicine, we've done surgeries. We've had a case where one of our ships in the Gulf of Aden went and rescued crew which had been hit by an incoming missile. 3 of those people were critical. Surgeries were done by a young woman doctor using telemedicine with the specialist back at Ashwini in Bombay for guidance. And all 3 lives were saved. And then they were taken ashore after being stabilized, put ashore in the hospital in Djibouti. Now, those are challenges. Courtesy technology, we're able to do it. We've had occasions where surgeries have been done underwater in a submarine. Man, an appendicitis, somebody's got, the submarine is underwater. The weather is terribly rough on the surface. If they try and come up on surface, the surgeon won't even be able to hold his scalpel. So the submarine CEO decided to dive. He went down. This is a few years ago it's happened. And they did the surgery underwater, saved the life. So anything that happens out at sea, the first thing is you got to remember is the element of time. Second is the element of distance. No. Third is the immense amount of trust that you have to have on each other as well as the people back home. And the fourth is the kind of camaraderie you need to build up because there is nobody else.
And just now when you're looking at the war in Iran, we're seeing what's happening there. Any particular learnings for the Indian Navy from there?
Tremendous. As I said, in any and every conflict, you watch any and every conflict, every event that's happening, because your job is to remain ready for all contingencies that may happen. And anything out at sea takes time. So you see an event that's occurred, either a new doctrine, a new technology, a new geopolitical event which you may not have foreseen. You revisit your plans, you revisit your procurement, you revisit your equipment, you revisit your training, and it's constantly happening. It's not that this happens as a standalone. It's happening all the time across the spectrum of conflict, from benign to subconventional to conventional operations. So there's nothing different or unique to say this one particular conflict, there is one great, huge different thing that has changed warfare on its head. It hasn't. Everything you're seeing in some form or the other has been seen before. You're watching it, trending it, and trying to stay apace with it, ideally ahead of it, but try and at least keep pace with it.
Since we're talking about Iran and Hormuz, about the mines that Iran seems to have placed, the undersea mines, and apparently forgotten where they placed them. How does that work? Can you explain to our viewers what these sea mines are? Has the Indian Navy ever tried to put sea mines anywhere? Okay. Is that really something that you do?
Okay. Now, let's take the first part of the question. Mines are essentially the same as you have on land. They are bombs which will explode when there is a trigger, an impetus, or a signal that comes in.
Right.
On land, you may bury them underneath the land. Out at sea, they can lie on the seabed. They can be moved mines. That means you got a sinker out, but through a line above, the mine itself is at a different depth. So it can work against ships, it can work against submarines. You can have mines which are, with the trigger is magnetic. You can have mines with the trigger is pressure. You can have mines which designed to operate by time and can come out and become floating mines. You can just have mines that are thrown into the water, which can go with the currents anywhere. And anything that strikes it as an impact may get triggered on impact or get triggered on proximity. So mine warfare is one of the earliest forms of warfare which goes back to the First World War. And it's taken off from the concept of what is done on land. Now, clearing mines at sea is not easy because the variety of mines are very different. Even clearing mines on land is a humongous task. It's a very long task which you have to do. Out at sea, everything becomes more difficult because of excess than it is on land. Now, in a narrow strait or narrow waters, what you'll have will not be an effective, complete minefield. All you need to put, or not even put, announce you've put, or not even announce you put. Let somebody else announce that it might have been put. Nowhere have I come across a statement where Iranian official figures have said we have laid mines and forgotten to put them. No. The possibility that mines have been placed, because till now all the vessels that have been struck, none of them have been struck by a mine. They've been struck by drones, they've been struck by missiles, they've been struck by RPGs.
But not by mines.
Not by mines. But the mere fact of positing the possibility that mines are out over there is enough to send the insurance through the roof and prevent the transit of vessels. No.
Right.
Now, the likelihood that somebody forgets where they've put mines is to be taken in the manner that the news has been leaked, not by any authentic source. Nobody puts a mine and doesn't keep an idea of where the mine is, because tomorrow we may need to use the same waters or same land spaces yourself.
Exactly.
So that's very, very unlikely. That's why even those statements have all been speculative, put out. They're classic strategic warfare and psychological warfare of putting pressure on the insurers, which is effectively is the insurance that has stopped the movement of ships. It's not the Iranian Navy or the US Navy that has acted to stop the movement that has come down to a trickle. It is the insurance that has been taken away, which is because of the risk factor, not the actual events. So now when this happens, you need a huge mine clearance operation. Last time, when their mines were actually laid, it took upwards of 6 months for a large coalition of navies working to clear it and certify that there are no mines.
Okay.
Is mine warfare a possibility and a likelihood? It remains.
Okay, it remains. And do all navies across the world?
All navies across the world have to prepare for it, that this may be something they'll face, and many of the navies will also have in their arsenal mines themselves and the capability to lay mines.
I just want to end with from where I started, which is about Operation Sindoor. Even if another misadventure comes across from our neighbors, and if you had to mount or not unpause Operation Sindoor, what do you see? Do you see a similar timeline? Because all the things that we learnt in the last operation, all those lessons have been learnt and changes have been made. How do you see it being different this time?
I think the readiness of the Indian Armed Forces and the Indian leadership to respond resolutely at a time and place of our choosing is now cast in stone. Whether we'll respond on day 1 or day 10 or day 20, the response will assuredly be there. That's the first thing that comes out very clearly. The timing of the operation will depend on the specific operational parameters, including where the target is, including the element of tactical surprise, including the kind of weapons you'll use, including the kind of opposition that may be there. But I think the earlier Southern Army commander and now the Army Vice Chief Army Staff put it across and is reported when he used the phrase cold start. I think we've moved beyond all the previous doctrines which we had with various names, and today we are in a position that we are ready for a cold start. So should the other side initiate something, I think the Indian Armed Forces, all three of them, are prepared for responding quickly in a time and place and manner that sends the appropriate message. What time frame we do it in, we will choose. The leadership will decide. Operationally, within that, we will adjust and see what is optimum for us. But rest assured, Ms. Aditi, if the other side tries something, it will not pass and get a free movement. The message has been sent before, the message will be sent again, and we will be ready to take it as far forward till they stop or pause or once again sue for peace. Let me also tell you that the bluff on the other side, the various,
We've called that.
various media that they've tried to push out, where they tried to say they are aware of it, I was watching it with great amusement. When they tried to say they knew where the Indian forces are operating, it wasn't even a good guess. If they try that guesswork again, it'll come home sharp, sure, and hard.
Okay. Any message for our viewers, sir?
Trust your forces. We are ready.
Thank you so much for talking to us.
Thank you, Ms. Aditi.